Tēnā koutou katoa, and welcome to the second Data and Information Committee meeting. We've got a huge agenda to work through with 7 reports today, most of which are the first of their kind, and they're highly complex, and we've only got 2 hours to do it. So we'll come to that as we get there. But welcome everybody, welcome. I think we've got public here, staff and media. Thank you for being here. So first of all, any apologies? Who are we missing? Anyone? No apologies. Public forum.
We've had no request.
No requests, no one to speak in public forum. Confirmation of the agenda. I'd like to make one small change to the agenda to accommodate a staff member, and that is just to move the transport. I think it's number 7.7.
7.7.
Thanks. 7.7 up. We'll do that after the groundwater report.
Okay.
Okay, so we'll
Move it to 7.3.
yeah, okay for that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so can I have a mover and seconder? Thank you.
Seconded.
And Andrew, so it's Carmen and Andrew. Mover and seconder. Any conflicts of interest? Okay, we'll move to confirmation of minutes.
Moved.
Seconded.
Thank you, Marion and Carmen. Okay, so next we've got the action register. Oh, can I have, vote on the confirmation of minutes. All
Aye.
Aye.
any against? No. Okay, thanks. The action register, there's only one item on that. Do we have any staff? Does anybody want to speak on that or add anything further? Jean-Luc, is there anything further on that or an outstanding action?
So this section is partially completed. So we've got the report available on the website, and the data that was presented in October about ground condition in South Dunedin been uploaded on the National Geotechnical Database. And what we haven't completely done is providing that to the city. We've provided the report, but we are in discussion on the best way to use it in planning, in a planning framework.
Has anyone got any questions of that? Okay, thank you. So we now move into the agenda. I just want to make a couple of points. The first one is our climate change risk assessment. Thanks, Jean-Luc and Kevin. And basically, we've got 2 hours to get through this, and we've got of this whole agenda. There's quite a lot of items, and I've advised we need to budget around 30 minutes for each of the climate risk assessment report and the overview of groundwater, which leaves us only about 10 to 15 minutes for each of the other items, the other 5 items. So let's just keep that in mind as we discuss, and be reminded that there's no decisions to be made here on this report. We are to receive the report, notes of some aspects, and endorse data sets and some proactive communication. But apart from that, all the other reports, we're just receiving data. So I'd like us to be careful not to get bogged down on what we might individually see as solutions. So we're just to receive the data. And so really what we want to do is to make sure that our own awareness of this data is really good, and that we ask questions for clarity. But apart from that, if we can just stick to the reports and not go any further, that would be marvellous. Thank you very much. So first up, Jean-Luc, would you like to talk to us about the climate change risk assessment?
Yeah, I'll make just a very quick introduction, and I'll let Elise present in more detail. So that's really the first climate change risk assessment made at the region scale. We really hope that this will form a milestone in better understanding the effect of climate change and the risk to be able to guide adaptation. So we tried to have a very comprehensive report covering different areas and domains, and cover the full region, not only the coast. So we're not only talking about sea level rise and effect of that on domain, we're talking about the full region and the effect of climate change on the region. The other important thing, there are two key things in that work. One is a report describing the risk, but the other part is the data set itself. So we're really hoping that this data set will be widely used in the region to help guiding adaptation. Now, the plan was to have Dr. Andrew Tate from NIWA to present. I don't know, Liz, if he's...
trouble joining.
Okay.
A couple of different options, so getting in there.
Okay.
Okay,
So
thank you. So what would you like to do with that?
I think we'll
Go over to
let
Elise.
Elise to present the risk assessment, and when Andrew will join, we'll hear about the climate predictions.
Okay, thanks, Elise, and welcome to the table.
Liz, do I have access to that? Yeah.
Maybe.
Let me,
Yeah. So the NIWA results that are presented within their separate standalone report formed the basis of our risk assessment. If we can get Andrew on later, he might give us a brief rundown of those results. But the key takeaway from their work is that they presented two representation concentration pathways, an RCP 4.5 and an RCP 8.5. The basis for our risk assessment was that we took the RCP 8.5 scenario, and this was done as this was considered the business as usual approach. So that was the basis of the climate information for our risk assessment. It's important to note that, as Jean-Luc described, that the risk assessment was regionally based, so the scale is quite large. It speaks to a broad range of changes and impacts that we can expect in the region and is not limited to any one particular. So we wanted to make sure that we were getting an overarching perspective of what climate change might mean for the region. It was assessed through 5 value domains. These are the human, natural, economy, built, and governance, and this is in alignment with the National Climate Change Risk Assessment. The process that we took was that we worked quite broadly with a range of groups. We approached Aukaha and Karunuka early on. They provided input into the risk assessment. They identified some limitations with us, and we're committed to working in partnership with them to work on some of the areas that they have raised, possibly through subsequent risk assessments and adaptation planning work, and some of them were addressed within the report itself. So there are a couple of sections in there that talk about what they've raised through that process. We worked through workshops and extensive targeted engagement. So we worked with various groups, one-on-one, sometimes collectively, pulled together all of their information. So the risk assessment is based on elicitation of their input into the risk assessment, based also on top of all of the assessments based on knowledge and reports and existing stuff that we had. So it's a combination, and it's ultimately ended up in a qualitative detailed risk assessment, which has produced a really large data set of information that is valuable across each of those 5 domains. It's important to note that the 3 domains, natural, economy, and built, were assessed slightly differently to the human and governance. So those 3 domains each came out with values ranked against them. So the risks were given low, medium, high, or extreme rankings, whereas the human and governance were not. And it's important, again, to note that this was due to the complexity and the difficulty of comparing risks under the human and governance domains. So the experts that we engaged with felt that it was inappropriate to provide these rankings and that it was quite difficult to do so. And the frameworks just didn't quite exist yet for us to undertake that process. So the process we've done here is to rank the 3 for those other domains, and then for the human and governance, it was to highlight risks that were of importance to our region. It's also important to note here that they sit alongside the national risk assessment. So risks that have been raised there under the human and governance domains and all the others are still relevant to us as a region, but the regional risk assessment really sits alongside that as something that says, okay, here is a regional focus. So they are to be looked at together. And see if we can go to the next slide.
Very similar to the last one.
I can see it.
I'm just
I
checking
think
you
it,
No,
I can see it changing on the.
that's right.
the share is
Different
working.
presentation I was prepared when I said, but I'm sure I'm right.
It's also important to note that opportunities were identified as well. So when we undertook the risk assessment itself, they are traditionally focused on kind of negative impacts, but we wanted to make sure that through this process we were also having discussions around what could potentially be an opportunity should these projections and changes come about. I might just continue on with that. So the basis for the risk assessment itself in terms of how do we define the risk, that was based on the IPCC, so that's the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, their definition of risk, which looks at the interactions between a hazard or a trigger, exposure, and vulnerability. So our risk equation took that into account and looked at vulnerability in terms of sensitive and adaptive capacity. So it's a lot of terms and ways of kind of saying that basically we looked at all of the elements across the region, how they might be exposed to changes in climate, and how then they might be vulnerable to that, how they're sensitive to it, how much capacity do they have to try and adapt to that and to mitigate those. So all of those components were then considered as a factor within the full risk assessment scoring. Still not working, that's all right. The risk assessment process came out that we had this comprehensive data set. It's a lot to work through, but one of the key points to note is that it was done through the 5 domains. Then there were variables that were assessed, and then they were compared against, if I can get the figure up, there was an example there around looking at a domain such as the built environment, and then an element such as something like an airport, and then understanding how a climate variable might affect that element. So I think the examples we had up was airports and the variables associated with that, with things like flooding and coastal sea level rise influence. So it gives you an example of how you might start to tackle and start to look at the data sets provided. The data sets are a table of risk, which is a matter of perspective depending on the sector review that you approach it. So in terms of how you might prioritize or respond to the data that this risk assessment has provided will depend on that lens. So providing that example is just one way of kind of looking at that data set. How we're intending to use that data set is that it is broad, given that it is across the whole region. It's looking at each of those 5 domains. There's a lot of variable information in there. We're anticipating that it will be utilised by a wide range of groups. So there were about over 70 people that were invited to be involved within that process. And we've already had feedback from people that we've worked through the process with them and shared the final report that it will be quite useful for them. So we're expecting it to be wide-ranging in its use. And that, just go to the last slide if you can. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and that it will ultimately support people to make adaptation decisions. So it's a basis. It's the first step in understanding what our risks look like across the region, and it's a stepping stone for us to start to look at how we prioritise those risks and then what we do about them. So I think I'll leave that for now, and I guess onwards from there is to say that information and data that we have in this space will continue to change, and in particular how we approach doing risk assessments and the frameworks will also continue to change. And there's already great work happening nationally and across other regional councils about how to start approaching this stuff differently. So it will be something that we take into consideration, and when the risk assessment's redone in alignment with the national one, we will be able to take those considerations into account. So
Okay.
I'll leave it with
All right. Have you anything to add, Jean-Luc? No? That's all good?
No, thank you.
Dr. Palmer? Thank you so much. Oh, did you have something else to add there?
Yeah, just checking if Andrew from NIWA is.
Is it?
again, I have IT working with this. He can't, there's something funny going on with his Zoom. He can't access the meeting. I've given him 3 different ways.
We'll bring him in if and when we can. But thank you very, very much for this. It's the first time we've received such a report. And although you've acknowledged some gaps, it's a comprehensive collation of the breadth of impacts that we have across every part of our region and every single sector and domain. So it's fascinating to see that. Can't say I've read every word yet, but I will. I've come pretty close. I think it's still common to think of climate change risks and impacts as mostly about sea level rise and coastal erosion. This report, as a first report, totally shows us that within just 20 years there are extreme risks right across Otago. So that's a really, really good to see that and understand that. And as a first report, it's the first time we've received such detail of widespread cascading effects. I know also this report will be updated, so it is that baseline. You've said the same thing, so that's good. And so with that in mind, let's open up for questions of clarity or comment anywhere from the room. Councillor Hobbs.
Just at the end, you said something about other regional councils. Are other regional councils doing a similar thing, and who might they be?
Yeah. Yep, there are.
And they are? Or is that a secret?
There are about 7 regional council or district council currently doing that. I don't have the list, but I know ECAN is working on that.
Southland?
Southland did a climate change impact assessment. I'm not sure if they worked to the next step and have a look to the risk, but they did engage NIWA to do the prediction for the region and work from that to see what the impact could be.
Second thing, I've got a comment which actually adds to something that we were talking about in our previous meeting. Amongst those things, when you go through humans and you end up with governance, under governance there were several things that were there which really to me talked about the importance of collaborative regional discussion. And I presume you people are beginning, or as a council we will sort of take this away and begin to put a timeline in place about tasks that we have to do. Okay, we haven't got all the information yet, but one of them up the front would be surely talking with district and city councils in our area. And that's where am I not hearing off in the wrong direction? That's people as page 367 of 819 under summary and next steps. And you say aspects of this risk assessment which will particularly benefit from collaborative regional discussions.
I just wondered if
Please go ahead.
Ms. Ellison could speak to the LTP and what we're providing in terms of next steps.
That's a great idea. Thank you.
Yes, so I guess as councillors are aware, we are looking at, we're currently doing a regional-wide emissions inventory, but we're also looking through the LTP process to put in place some resources to provide that regional-wide partnership approach to climate change, both adaptation and mitigation. Just also would like to note that my peers across the country last week were talking about this very topic in terms of how through LG&Z climate change is built into the governance structure, so that we have across the regional councils are talking and working together on the topic.
Thank you. Councillor Laws and then Councillor Deaker.
I guess, the summation is really it's going to get warmer, wetter, windier and wilder. And that's pretty much what we're going to tell our community, and then they're just going to get on with doing what the private sector does best, which in individuals, which is adapt. I'm interested in, though, we're obviously doing this information, if not for the first time, then it's certainly in a nascent capacity. And so I'm really interested in how we continually update this information to ensure, its validity and its accuracy to the greatest degree that we can. Are you intending to do this every year? using this as, if you like, as your template?
The intention for the moment is to renew the risk assessment every 6 years.
Every 6 years.
And that's aligned with the National Climate Change Risk Assessment. They have also a 6-year framework. Now, what we're planning to do also in the meantime is collect information, receive also feedback from different stakeholders and the public on the risk assessment and on areas that may need further research, and use that period of 5-6 years to start updating the next one. The other thing will be also keeping in mind and the contact with the central government and MFE, because they'll be also providing guidance on the methodology to do the next risk assessment. We are part of a working group with MFE and other regional council to better understand how the risk assessment could be done at a regional scale. And that, I think, will help inform the next iteration of that risk assessment.
I'm particularly interested in landfills. Now, given that answer, we've always in New Zealand had a bury and forget policy towards landfills, and Fox gave us a pretty good indication that, well, guess what? There are some problems with that, almost independent of climate change. So climate change tells us there's an additional risk of them being opened up or scoured out, but that risk is going to exist anyhow. For our point of view, do we need to take, in your view, this report and now, I guess, Gwyneth, run the policy assumptions that run out of it? In other words, take this report and now here are all the action points that arise from this. And obviously landfills would be one of them. Is that where we are going next?
I think we would use the report in terms of how we then reflected it in our planning instruments. Yes. I'm not clear on what you mean about in terms of a list of actions that come out of the report. That's all.
I'll explain. We do state of environment monitoring. It's a document that's usually as big as this. It goes thump on the table, and really that's about all it does. We don't necessarily let its conclusions drive, you know what I mean, our reaction. And I'm worried it might go the same way.
Yeah. No. So climate change is definitely a topic of interest, and what the environmental monitoring team is looking at in terms of improving our SOE network. So yes, it would feed into that. In terms of, but it's both in terms of adaptation and terrestrial, as well as things like snow melt.
Shall we bring Anne in on this? Is that what you're saying, Gretchen? There you are. Come on up, Anne, and grab a microphone so people can hear you. Thanks.
I'm just going to say that one of the things in terms of how we take this report forward is that we'll look at it in more detail in terms of what it can tell us at a number of different levels: internal policy, external collaboration, how we need to take account of it in decision making in terms of our policies and planning. And basically the strategy team are going to be taking that role as part of their LTP program going forward.
Strategy team in the
Councillor Deaker and then Councillor Scott.
Yep, thanks, Alexa. This report is potentially massively important to the people of Otago. No question about that. And my question, and it's to whoever can answer, whether it be Ian or Gavin or Elise or whoever, is how those people are going to find out about it, how they're going to get access to it. What are we doing now that we're the recipients of this huge amount of data to make sure people understand it? Are we going to have stuff in people's mailboxes? Are we going to have community briefings or whatever? If I was a fisherman at Moeraki or a tourist operator at Wanaka or a grape grower in the Gibbston Valley, I would want to be able to see this and use its fine-grained potential to make decisions about the next 20 years for my business, because that's what it enables. And they might be positive decisions. They might be decisions to say, hey, let's get out of here. Who knows? It's up to them to make those decisions. But it's our job is to get the information to everybody that we can lay hands on. Or if we can't lay hands on them, put it in front of them. So that's my question. How are we going to do this? It's a huge amount of information. It's critically important to all of our futures. How do we get it out there?
Thanks, Elise.
Yes, through you, the chair. Yeah, good, great question. And it is one of the key next steps for us with this report. And there are a few things outlined within the next steps of the committee paper presented here. But ultimately, yes, we will have a section on our website. We already have a section that talks to climate change, and within that there is a section on the risk assessment itself that's been updated and worked on and should go live soon, and that will detail key points from the report itself, key figures. We're going to have a live section of the website that allows people to engage with that report and provide us their opinions, how they think climate change will impact themselves, feedback on the report. We're also going to target as many community things as we can and groups as we can, and some of the things listed in there are around festivals. The Wanaka show in particular is being run this week and I will be attending, and so that will be an opportunity for us to talk about the report and the findings and how people have really received it and what information they want pulled out of it. So yes, there will be there is a comms plan in place, and we will implement that, and it will develop as we learn from the public as well what they really want to know.
Would it not also be the case that, I mean, there's a huge number of stakeholders involved there. They would also disseminate this information, I should think?
Just a quick follow-up question since you mentioned that. I couldn't help but notice that we had a very large stakeholder engagement list, and I was tickled to bits by that. And I counted up about 84, but 37 of them did not respond. What do we make of that? Is that because they don't care or not interested?
40 odd did respond.
Didn't have time. Yeah. That's about a 60% hit rate out of that group of people, but that's not good enough.
I think it's pretty high, probably. But is there a comment in there at all? Okay, we'll move to Councillor Scott then. Thank you.
I just want to follow on from some of the discussion before in terms of next steps. Obviously, there's a communication step, but my understanding listening to that or watching the presentation, that a key step at some point is to define our priorities for the adaptation planning, and then once that's done, is to feed it into research. And I suspect we've already identified, for example, that South Dunedin as a priority, and we're already doing some research, and we'll identify other priorities along with the feedback that we'll get from our community. Is that fair? And maybe before you answer it, one of the key things from my perspective about this report is that it really put the fear of God into me, if I'm allowed to say that. It's not the right words, but it's really important that we do our mitigation as well as we can. And, as a council, whoever, or as individuals, while there's a momentum there, we still need to do as well as we can in terms of our mitigation. And I suspect some of our excuses that we have, just don't hold up. So anyway, I make that point. But at some point, my question is, it's about prioritisation, correct or incorrect?
That's correct. And as you mentioned, we already have adaptation happening. You mentioned South Dunedin. We're doing work at the head of Lake Wakatipu to help adaptation, not necessarily only for the effect of climate change, but for a change of the environment. And climate is a key. What the risk assessment is giving us a comprehensive and structured way to look to those areas instead of being responsive. It's a way to prioritize those areas, and that be one next step for the regional council. It will be to derive priorities from the risk assessment.
And what I found also very interesting is how it integrates into our infrastructure strategy that we talked about this morning. Both huge, sets of work in terms of, that whole process. There's synergies between the two, yeah?
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. I'd like to put the motion. We have had half an hour on this now. If that's all right, have I got a seconder for all 4 recommendations? That's that we received the report, note the data set and information, note the changes expected to occur in our climate. That's the NIWA part, which we haven't heard from them, but maybe we will at some point, and endorse the data set and report and the proactive presentation and dissemination of this information to public and stakeholders. Go, Kate. So Kate's seconding. Can I put that motion? Is anybody votes? Everybody for?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone against?
Thank you.
Carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that chunky piece of work there. I'm probably likely to be a bit horse to waterish in terms of communication, but there we are. So the next item is overview of groundwater quality state of the environment for Otago. Now, this is the first time again that we've had this report. A lot of firsts in this meeting today, and it's fantastic to see it done. Welcome. Who have we got? Gwyneth, and I'm really sorry I don't know your name.
Levy is the last name, isn't it? This is Emil Levy. He's one of our groundwater scientists in a science team.
Welcome, Emil. Kia ora.
John.
You want?
Okay, thank you. Have you got anything further to add on this paper?
I just thought I might just give a very brief introduction to it and then open the floor to questions. So, so it's the first comprehensive groundwater quality SOE report. So we've got around 54 bores in the monitoring network that we monitor every quarter by the environmental monitoring team. So the main parameters are E. coli, major anions and cations, magnesium, calcium, chloride, metals and nutrients, nitrate, phosphate, and ammonia. And this report summarizes it using the FMU and ROHE framework, basically, and the current aquifers of Otago. So, so sort of just going through the whole different areas and looking at the results against the drinking water standards for E. coli, nitrate, and dissolved arsenic. And we've also done more of a screening exercise against for nutrient concentrations in groundwater. That's basically it.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Laws first and then Hillary, Councillor Calvert. But I'd just like to thank you for this, and this report is going to be really important to a lot of people in Otago, as the other one is as well, as they all are. Go, Councillor Laws.
Thank you. Waikouiti has proven to us that you can test for stuff. No, there can be stuff there that you're not testing for that is dangerous to those who are consuming the water or will eventually partake of it. And you've told us today what you're testing for. And I noticed that lead wasn't there, or any other heavy metals.
Heavy metals.
Yeah, metals.
There are heavy metals.
Mm-hmm. Lead, we are going to start, we are going to do.
You are going to do that as a result of Waikouiti.
Yes.
Yeah. What are the heavy metals apart from lead? What other? I know it's difficult, isn't it? Because you're really being asked to say, is the meteorite going to strike? What are the other, I guess, quantifiable tests that you hadn't thought of initially, but now sort of enter your horizon?
So specifically it's lead, and then we're going to do copper and zinc, starting from this round. So, but again, I mean, if you look at the monitoring has sort of evolved. So, if you look probably 20 and 30 years ago, there was only very few parameters, but then E. coli, we started doing E. coli regularly since 2011, I think, and then arsenic since a couple of years ago. So and then we also participate in national surveys that CRIs do. So there's the pesticide survey every 4 years. So that's for pesticides and EOCs, what they call emergent organic contaminants. So that's done with ESR and GNS.
Are you expecting this information to end up, well, with whatever agency is responsible for the Three Waters reform, I guess? So is this at the moment, this information is coming to us and we'll act upon it? But when the Three Waters reforms come through, Gwyneth, is that where this information will finally go?
Well, I think the first thing to say is the Three Waters reform is still ongoing, so we're not 100% clear of all our responsibilities as yet. But we are aware that we believe there might be additional requirements in terms of testing under the new Three Waters regime. Whether that's specific to groundwater or not, it's not necessarily specific to groundwater though. Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Culbert and then Councillor Hobbs.
I'm just not sure whether I'm reading this quite correctly, but you've got option.
There you go.
Yes. You've got here options for improvement, which include phased replacement of unsuitable bores with new dedicated bores, and that they should be located based on their representation of the different aquifers. And then over the next page, you've got a description. Considerable effort is being put into review and upgrade of the network and replacement of existing unsuitable bores. Does that mean that we are also, in those financial considerations and policy considerations, doing what it says back over the page, which is changing the network a bit? If they're unsuitable, would you be putting new ones in other places and things? Because that's not quite the same as replacing existing ones with new dedicated ones. You know, it's a bigger thing the options suggest.
So are you basically asking whether we just replacing ones or are we going to add to, is that the question? Or?
Yeah, add as in what the third bullet point of the options say. Is that what the plan means? This is page.
So
I'm not sure.
I'll get Amir to correct me if right. If we have got, first of all, we have through the LTP process, we're planning a review of the entire network, so not just groundwater. I know Amir has specifically to groundwater. Amir has capital set aside for both upgrades and new bores. Replacement and new bores. So both.
Yes, but that doesn't suggest that new bores that are put in different places which might accurately reflect the FMUs or aquifers.
Yeah, so I think one of the issues with currently existing bores is a lot of them would just be private bores that at some point, I guess council accessed the landowner. They've asked if they can monitor them, and they said yes. But there is issue with that. First of all, some of the bore conditions is not ideal, and the other thing as well, they can obviously, being on private land, they can just say we don't want the bores to be monitored anymore, which we have had incidents like that. So yeah, so ideally would drill new bores that are placed on TLA land with access.
Well, sorry, would they be, is the intention that they would fit in with this option that says phased replacement of unsuitable bores with new dedicated bores, which you're saying yes.
Yeah.
New bores should be located based on their representation of the different FMU and aquifers. So do we end up with a better, more representative new bore network is where I'm going with that, because that's the suggestion, I think.
That's right. That's correct. We're aware that some aquifers, I believe, we don't necessarily have a bore in at all, for instance. So we would be looking to put bores in where there are none. But we also will be looking to, I guess, replace and move bores to get a better representative network.
So it's included in those LTP. It's in there for the cool. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Hobbs, Scott, then Wilson. And
Thanks,
then
people. In page 16 of the report, you referred to there are several recommendations in light of this report, and that was about the good bore security you've just been talking about. And I finally found out what that was. I had to read on several pages, got there. But you also, just on a couple of ones back, you talked about Glenorchy and Kingston, where you had, I think it was E. coli. Oh yeah, high DRP and nitrate concentrations were measured in Kingston and Glenorchy, likely due to high septic tanks density. Immediately that says to me that amongst the list of to-dos that we might have to take from this report, not only is it about good secure bores, but we might have to have a conversation with the DAs, the district councils, who are letting there be lots and lots of, what do you call it, septic tanks holding hands. I mean, sorry for my colourful language,
sharing.
But far too many of them. That's what you mean by deaths, isn't it?
Yeah.
Now, you didn't pull that out. Is that the sort of thing that you would like us to take from the report? Well, I'm almost looking around the whole council. There is work here that should be done, not just by you, but by us. I mean, that's straight political work, really, isn't it? Whichever one of you is going to answer.
We do have relationships at officer level. That's the kind of thing we would be discussing in terms of the planning framework.
That's right.
In terms of plans, whether or not it's a topic that you wish to take up at a political level.
Okay, that's up to us, I suppose.
Yeah.
But almost in a sense sometimes, can I just suggest that in these reports, you might put down, here are some political to-dos, here are some things that we're going to do. In other words, we have a role to play in that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott, then Wilson, then Noon.
Great. I've got a couple of questions that I'd like to ask. Before that, I'd like to just make a couple of comments. The first one is a big thank you, because my understanding is that this is the first comprehensive summary of Otaga's groundwater SOE results. Yeah. So, you know, long time coming. Well done. Thank you. In relation to the report, I do make the comment that, you know, it goes into how, you know, how we're communicating. And I got the email that there will be a communications release. And I think that's good, because it's not a straightforward report. Some might say it's actually quite an academic report. So we just need to, you know, if we're trying to communicate scientifically the state of the nation, we need to look at how we do that. Anyway, I make that point, but let's focus on the thank you. Before I get to the question, my understanding is that this is not good news. Degraded water quality in the Lower Clutha/Torrey and North Otago groundwater, got elevated E. coli, high nutrient concentration, when nitrate and DRP have exceeded limits. So my first question is, how bad is it? You know, negligence by the landowner. How did this occur? How concerned should we be? That's my first question.
So they aren't good results. I would agree with that. I guess the important role that we have is doing that monitoring and then explaining that the results aren't good. And then we have mechanisms through our planning processes to try and address some of that. We also have been working hard in terms of the relationships with the TA and the District Health Board in terms of where we do have a single occurrence. We do get a single result that we work with people to notify. We are doing, I guess, the best of our job as best as we can as an organisation.
Yeah. But, you know, out in the community, and it's urban and rural, septic tanks and different things, undoubtedly we'll have to start doing some things differently. Is that fair?
I see you'd like to add to this at the moment. Are you happy for me to pass over right now, Gwyneth? Or what do you want to do?
I was just going to comment on the water services bill and what that means. which is before the House at the moment. And of course, you will be aware that we're responsible for drinking water at source, but in fact, water suppliers will have some new obligations. And at the moment, it's water suppliers, right, not down to a single household supply, but certainly down to if you have, for example, you know, the main homestead on a farm and then a farm cottage and workers' cottages, etc. And as a part of that, there will be a range of requirements in maintaining the safety of that supply and addressing any kind of issues. I think the other point I would make is that while, yes, absolutely, there are some things that we may be able to influence and control, there are some things within this report that are natural occurrences. And so that is
arsenic, yeah.
Arsenic. Understand that.
Okay, and my final question, if I may, Madam Chair, is just, I'm just looking for there's 4 options of, hang on a minute, I'll just find that page, options for improvement. 4 options for improvement. One was to ensure good borehead security. The next one, review legislation and management of known high-risk activities. The third one, phased replacement of unsuitable SOE bores. And the fourth, publish SOE data online. So, you know, they're presented as options, but my assumption, you know, reading them, is that we should be doing all 4 of them. They're not expected to be done separately. You know, like a good practice would be to do all 4.
Yep, and we are doing all 4.
Okay, and we are, I mean, like this report is, the recommendations to receive this report, I'd like to signal my intention to put a second part of that recommendation to
We can't do that
in this for improvement.
We can't do that. This is only an information receiving committee.
Okay.
So we just received the information. We can maybe take that up at a later date in another committee.
So this will be passed on to another committee, will it?
Well, I don't know, but you may have to take that up to work it through that way if you want to do more with this option.
Always move that, Brian.
We can only receive information in this committee.
The terms of reference doesn't.
No, but you could move that you refer this committee.
Yeah.
It doesn't even do that. We can only receive information here.
You can seek counsel too.
Terms of reference of the
You can
committee.
ask counsel.
Oh, that's
a minute.
So can we move on from that?
You have approved the terms of reference.
So we're going to stick it on the shelf.
No, it's Gwyneth has just told us that they're taking all 4 options and working them through.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Kia ora, thank you. Nice to have you here, Mr. Levy. Doctor, apologies, thank you. Needs to have that on the paper so we know. Apologies. And thank you, Ms. Elson. Look, I found this really interesting. I have to acknowledge that I haven't read absolutely every single word because we've had a wee bit of reading this week. So apologies if I cross-reference.
Mic on, please. And you just turned your mic off.
Oh, sorry, I thought
that's apologies. Thank you.
I've read enough to make me wonder. You've given some recommendations, and there's 2 recommendations that I'm intrigued aren't there. One is a better review of septic tank and how well they're used, because it's sometimes we go to fixing something that may not be the bit that's broken. And I appreciate farm practices is part of that, but septic tanks are another. And perhaps it's a question I have to ask at regulatory tomorrow about when are we going to get a review of or understanding of how well the septic tank systems are working. But you didn't go into that area at all. That's because that wasn't your issue?
Yeah, I mean, I think that'll be part of the new, the work on the new land and water plan.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Which is that's where the regulatory framework for that will be.
Okay. In some areas, like through Madam Chair, there's areas protected for groundwater, and one of those areas is Outram, for example. Yep. Areas which are dependent on bores. Did you think of that as being a mechanism to protect the water by requiring consents for any activities that may impinge on the groundwater?
Yeah, I'm not that familiar with the I guess the regulatory stuff for septic tanks. But I think, yeah, that would be one of the mechanisms that we will look into. And
Okay.
again, part of the new land and water regional plan.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Noon.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Welcome along, Amir. Great to have you on board. Just my query was around the 55 groundwater bores that are monitored. Are any of them actual real-time monitoring regimes, or are they all the here and now?
Yeah, so we've got this report only looked at water quality. So we have got, I can't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but we have got quite a few bores that I think it's around 20 that we measure levels in them. So they're continuously. And then, yeah.
Okay, so about 40% or thereabouts.
Yeah.
Or there, yeah, okay. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Yep.
Thank you. I think that's through the questions. Carmen. Councillor Hope.
No, thank you. That on your options for improvement, the first one is ensuring good borehead security is practiced across the target to prevent contamination into your aquifers, right? And then you go on to talk about bore construction, security, maintenance, and there's education. Am I correct? I know this is 55 bores, but I'm also thinking of places like a township as well. Are you taking that into consideration as well? Such as, like, for example, Middlemarch, where you have bores and then you have a different system there, but you still have the water coming in across the land into the bores to get there. I just want to know how far you're taking this, please.
So, and we can add some more detail if required. So if we were to get a result back that showed there was an exceedance, we would do communications for the area. It's not just a single bore. We would look at the general area and put out information around, we'd work with obviously the TAs and the health authorities in terms of providing information, health information. But from our perspective, our communications is often about the bore security and maintenance and the importance of that. We don't target the single bore with the result, but we target the area where the occurrence occurred in terms of communication.
Thank you for that, for clarifying. The other thing I want to know is, and forgive me if it's in here, I didn't see it, on that, if you have a problem, do you then get the bores to be registered? How many bores have we got registered domestically?
Again, that's another. So the way the consenting works, I think if bores are older than, I think it's 1998, they don't need a consent, and that's definitely an issue in the database. So there's some areas we don't know where the bores are, and also there's lots of again older bores that the coordinates are not necessarily going to be updated, which is again that's another issue. Yeah, generally, if it's if the bores are used for, if they're not a monitoring bore, generally they need a consent. And if they get a consent, then they will be registered. So, but I guess the main issue with that is mainly the older bores. So again, that's something we are trying to address slowly. But yeah, that's definitely
Right, but there's a lot of work to do, isn't there?
Yeah.
And that whole pre-1998.
Yeah, the whole bores database and stuff. There's plenty of work in that area.
Thank you.
Move to receive the report, Madam Chair.
I'll second it.
Thank you. Do you want to speak to it, either of you? Okay.
Thank you, and it's a milestone.
Yeah, there's some important public messages in this report too, isn't there? There really is. We've got to get people to test their bores.
Yeah.
And we've got to talk about septic tanks. I think of the public messages. Okay, all in favour?
Aye.
Anyone against? No. Thank you. Thank you very much, Gwyneth and Amir. That was really useful, interesting report.
Now you know when there's trouble with water.
Okay, the next, we're going to now jump to 7.5.
Give me the figures. Yeah.
7.5, which is our transport one, isn't it? Oh, 7.7. 7.7, sorry.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Gary. Is it Gary?
Give me the numbers.
It's the end of the end of that debate.
Okay, so what are we doing here? Come on, give me the whole thing that I want. Escape there.
Yeah, I'm on it, darling.
Okay, so now we are
I'm
going
under
to
control.
Welcome, Gary. Can you tell us a bit about this report, since I can't find it at the moment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My co-presenters have abandoned me, although one of them has just arrived. So,
okay, here we go.
We were going to tag team with me today, Julian Phillips. I'll let Julian introduce himself, and then
Julian, that's my last sleeve.
Yes, it is.
Thanks, Julian. Welcome. I know you have to go at some point, so it's we have moved this agenda item forward. So you're going to talk to us about public passenger transport.
What page we're starting on, sorry?
7.7, which is page 802 of the book.
532 if you're in your hard copy.
The item is 7.7, the quarter 1 and 2 patronage reports.
This is to get out at the very end of the meeting.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the purpose of this paper is to report on how our services are performing, looking at the last 6 months, both in terms of patronage, complaints, and some other matters. And I might just get Julian to talk about some of the highlights that we just want to flag.
Yeah. For those who don't know me, I'm the implementation lead for the transport team, which is effectively managing the operations side of things, and my team put together a lot of the data you see in this report. So as Gary said, the report in front of you gives you an overview of the performance of the Dunedin and Queenstown networks, which is differing quite significantly. The key thing here being the impact of COVID-19. So COVID-19 has hit patronage hard across the region, but we're currently in a position where for the past few months at least, Dunedin has actually been tracking at a higher level in terms of patronage than pre-COVID, whilst Queenstown is significantly down on patronage. Bracketing this, we should remember that we've had several months of free travel to September 2019, followed by the reintroduction of revenue collection and the B card, and also a $2 fare trial in Dunedin at the same time, followed again more recently by the change in Supergold free travel back to pre-COVID travel parameters. So this all needs consideration when looking at the upward trend in Dunedin patronage, where, for example, the $2 trial fare in particular has been very well received, but it is a trial at the moment. In Queenstown, we've seen a big drop in patronage, and that reflects the impact that's well known that COVID has had in the area. However, it's noted in the report that the more commuter-oriented routes have are actually increasing in patronage. So the routes that service the airport, Arrowtown, which broadly speaking could be considered the sort of more tourism-oriented routes, have, you're looking at around a 45% drop, but actually we're looking at a few percentage points increase in the other routes we operate there. We have, as an aside, made adjustments to those routes in the last few months to cater to commuters a bit better, which may also be a reason why they've increased. Also, because I know it's a topic that's being talked about, I wanted to talk a little bit about real time, which is in the report. So bus real-time information, or RTI, basically means live timings and tracking of the bus network. And this can be shown on electronic displays at bus stops, on the web, on smartphones, on apps, and e-stops, and even on non-smartphones. Now, as many of you will know, for the Wakatipu network, Queenstown's already had a trial real-time service operating for the past couple of years or so. And after launch, one of the big things that was noted was that there's a massive, significant drop in customer inquiries and complaints, which was an immediate benefit. And the system was very well received by both passengers and other key stakeholders in the area. We were being pushed quite hard by a number of agencies for whatever reason. The Chamber of Commerce, that was one of their big items, was real time, and yeah, the feedback has been excellent. Now that same system, well, basically the technology allows anyone to view the current location of buses across any of Queenstown's 5 routes on their phone or their computer, and users just simply click on there or select their desired route to access the information. The bus location is updated every 15 seconds. And on the Orbus Queenstown website, if you were to go to that now, instead of seeing a static map, which is what you see on the Orbus Dunedin website, the first thing you see is a live tracking map. For the Dunedin network, we actually already have most of the fleet being tracked. We've had it being tracked for about most of the past 6 months. with the final harbour installations taking place at the moment. And when launched, it's the same provider and the system will have the same features as the Queenstown network. So again, the technology also allows presentation via e-stops and wayfinders, such as in the bus hub. The e-stops in particular are well suited to being adapted into existing infrastructure and can be solar powered, and they can be fixed to a very similar pole to a normal bus stop. They're also a lot cheaper than they used to be. And we actually have a test solar powered e-stop that will display route information to Peninsula residents. It has already been installed, it's undergoing testing, it can be seen right now in McAndrew Bay. That was actually originally a request about a year or so ago from the Peninsula Community Board, a couple of councillors there, due to the road widening, which is causing massive delays and will continue to cause massive delays. And there's nothing we can do about it. So if people can see on a sign when their bus actually is, then it saves them having to sit outside in the rain for 10 minutes. Yeah, we've also been discussing similar tech with, for example, Queenstown Airport. We may potentially put a unit in there and other areas. So there are big benefits for the consumer, for the ORC, for the transport team, and for you guys. The system provides an extensive back end, which will become an essential tool for the transport team. So it gives us timely, instantly available information to assist with everything from contract management to service monitoring, KPIs, network reliability, and more. A lot of stuff that we currently have to do with bums on seats. Yeah, I mean, that's basically a summary of what we've got. If you want to chip in at that point, Gary.
Happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions, but I'll go after Councillor Wilson first and then Councillor Cole.
Thank you. Exciting times with real time. Can I just, I'm confused. Paragraph 9 talks about it not being mobile friendly. Does that mean that you can actually see it, but it's not particularly easy to see on a phone? Because you said it can be seen on a phone, and that's what I don't understand.
Yeah, I mean, it's not very mobile friendly, but we are at the same time, or approximately at the same time, I should say, all being well, of launching the real-time in Dunedin. We're also launching a partnership with Transit, who are kind of the Google of the real-time tracking world, or the Apple. So again, there's a couple of screenshots in the paper, but effectively that is an interface designed for mobile use. It's if you're interested in buses and you live elsewhere or from overseas, it's the app you like to have, and that has an intuitive interface, and we'll roll that out across both areas. Yeah, and the app's free.
Great, that delights me. But your ability to use the app is that you'll be able to see the routes that aren't performing to the timetable, or will you be able to do that sort of back end? Because it's great for someone to be able to see when the bus is coming today, but for you to see if how the contract's performing, or whether there has to be an alteration to the timetable because it's just constantly because it's so close.
You can drill down to individual driver detail. It's that level of sophistication. So yeah, we can have the potential to see if a timetable needs adjusting, if it's driver behaviour, congestion, all sorts of things. Yeah. So,
if I can, Madam Chair, that's the back end of the tracker bus system. It's different from the transit app that the consumer uses.
No. Okay, but as long as that data is going to be available. Yeah. Okay, both ends. So, and last question through you, if I may, it would be great to see in the next report, and I know you sort of talk about the next report, being able to see some of the actual routes, and so the comparison you've got of route 1, route 2 is actually understanding what those routes are, and highlighting the ones that aren't tracking.
Yeah.
Because I think that's something that we need to be able to understand when people complain to us. And I should have asked the last question, because I know that Councillor Hobbs can't ask it. When can we know that State Highway 88's bus will run on time for her?
That's unfair to the poor driver.
Well, I'm not sure that it is the poor driver. That's what I want to understand, is to understand what's...
just the same problems as the other one on the other side.
Through you, Madam Chair, I mean, that's the issue. Those buses are in the same traffic as everybody else, and until we start getting some of the stuff coming through Shaping Future Dunedin, or you get the data and go, that bus is always running 10 minutes late, so let's do something with the timetable. you really don't have an option of putting extra fleet in just to pick up some stuff because of the cost. I mean, you could put a bus in on standby, but you're paying for that bus all day.
No,
That's a significant cost.
it may have been sounds facetious. It was actually a serious point to it, is understanding that particular bus route, because it is difficult on that road. I mean, it's really constrained.
Yeah.
Is understanding whether we have to do something different. Thank you.
Councillor Calvert.
I've got a variety of sort of different issues I've sort of struck with the buses. The first thing is that it says here that all complaints have been followed up by staff. Are you suggesting that that's been satisfactory to the person who's made the complaint?
I would say it's not always satisfactory because someone might want a bus route to be going down a particular road. We are unable to do that, or we are unable to extend the evening services at this point of time. It might require something, it might be a question that requires someone inputting into the RPTP or something like that. So they're not always to the customer's satisfaction. But I would say generally, I think yes.
I mean, take the biggest by far lot of complaints are timeliness.
Yeah.
That's not something that's, we put out something saying that's the time it should be, and people are complaining that it's not on time.
Mm-hmm.
So there's three things we could do. One of them is engage with that person to understand it properly and to explain how we're going to fix it.
Mm-hmm.
We could change the timetable because it's not doable.
Mm-hmm.
Or we could say we've got a contract with the bus company saying it will be on time and deal with the bus company. Are we doing any of those three things?
Yeah, I mean, as an example, we used to have several complaints about the Route 3 service, which is Ocean Grove, Tomahawk area to town, and that, it goes to Ross Creek, but the Ocean Grove to Bus Hub bit was always running late. We looked at it, spoke to the operator, and actually there wasn't enough time in the timetable. So about a year ago, we adjusted the timetable and complaints have gone because we've managed to put sufficient time in the timetable so it operates better than it did previously. So other timetables in the past, we have made changes to account for peak traffic on certain routes, that kind of thing. But so on occasion we would do that.
I've been watching backwards and forwards complaints about the 11 service,
Mm-hmm.
and what the person who's making the majority of the complaint
Mm-hmm.
seems to be getting the message back, the traffic gets busy and things, which you'd usually respond to by changing the timetable if it just isn't doable sometimes of day. And that isn't, I know it's not a perfect option, but it's not helpful just to keep having a bus that.
It may not be appropriate to discuss individual complaints here because it's just not the whole picture.
It's how we deal with it doesn't matter that it's that one, but how we deal with a complaint of timeliness. And I'm wondering whether the idea that people have been talking about around the council table of having a not before time in our timetable rather than a roundabout time in our timetable would be helpful, because the combination of
it's very operational and solutions based. If we can try and keep to accepting the data rather than going into solutions, which I'm sure.
Well, this report has raised that we deal with all complaints and that
yes, we
real
do.
time is going to do something, and that this is what's happening. And actually,
I'm not sure that there's much more. If you have a response for that, that's fine. But I don't think there's much we can deal with at this level.
High-level response, which is real time, gives the ability to analyse these sort of things in a much easier way than having to physically do it. There may be routes that need tinkering with. There may be other routes that actually have a knock-on effect on bus routes, because most buses cross-functional. They work across different routes, or a bus will finish one route, say St Clair, whatever, and then switch onto another route. If that previous service is hit by congestion, you can knock it on. We have overflow services. There's a lot of stuff, and I think it's a complex issue to answer quickly. But what I would say is that the real-time data certainly gives us the opportunity to much more readily look at the accuracy of timetables.
Can I just ask for an answer to the not before question?
I think it's solutions focused, which is not what this committee's about. I don't think it should be answered at this point. I think you could put that in an email to Dr. Palmer, and it would be answered that way. I'd like to move. Do you have anything else in terms of clarification of the reports, Haru? Okay, I'd like to go to Councillor Hobbs and then Councillor Malcolm.
Just a brief one. You talk about super gold card holders,
yep,
and the increase in those. I understand that there is a problem, and well, tell me, confirm with me or not, is there a problem when you went back to, we go on free from 10 until 3 and we pay on the other edges? Has there been a problem in the transition from free to
through
pay?
you, Madam Chair. So there has been a number we've struck where they have used their B card.
It's got nothing on it.
At some point prior to the change, and so they've gone into deficit. Not being their fault, it's not been a big number. We're in the process of fixing that because we've had some passengers that have gone to tag on and said you can't because your card's in deficit. We are fixing that.
Thanks, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Malcolm.
Just a wee one here. Complaint on page 811 on the output numbers. Complaints about lost property. Are you beating yourself up? Is that just someone inquiring about the lost property, or are they actually complaining because they've lost it on the bus?
Yeah, I mean, to give you a bit of context around that, there are so many different, I would tend to call the bulk of this inquiries, some of which are complaints. We collect as much information as we can. We started a new process as of December, and at the moment we're collecting, and we added to that, I think in February, we started collecting lost property data, which we didn't previously report on. So you'll see a ramp up in lost property figures from like 3 to 20 to 40 simply because we thought, well, other regions report on that, so we'll report on it too. I don't think it collates to anything in particular or correlates to anything in particular. I wouldn't say it's a complaint, it's more an inquiry and something we collect information on.
Yeah, well, if I could just suggest, I know it is operated, that you actually call it an inquiry because it will get reported as another complaint against the buses, which I think fairly represents what's actually happened.
So through you, Madam Chair, there is a language thing here. We've just got things complaints where there's actually inquiries, complaints, and things like lost property.
Comments. I think the difficulty with that is the benefit of collecting the data versus the time it takes to categorise in a more granular way.
I think we can, have we got there? I've got one question that hasn't been answered yet, I don't think, and that is the number of complaints. I can't remember how many it was, 600 and something. I'm not sure if that's high, low or indifferent, and I wondered if you had any comparison with other centres.
So compared to similar sized regions, we're kind of around the same or lower. So that's sort of Waikato, ECAN. One thing to be really clear here is we might categorise something as a complaint, but subsequently recategorise it if it's not a reasonable complaint. As an example, I talked to someone this morning. The Mosgiel service at the moment is at capacity at peak times, so we're running 2 buses at a time. But then the second bus gets to standing room only. There's nothing wrong with standing on a bus. It's just something you have to do if the bus is busy. We like a busy network. Some people don't like standing on the bus and don't want to have to stand on the bus. So we get a complaint about the fact that they had to stand. So to me, that isn't a valid complaint. And so I would actually go back to the person that administers that and say, hey, I've talked to the customer, but this is not a complaint, it's a comment.
Do we note that as a comment, as something that can be used to improve services at some later date, perhaps? I guess that comes into a levels of service conversation at some point. Yes, we
do. And from that very same service, we actually swapped all the vehicles out about 4 years ago, because they originally only had standing room for 3 or 4 people, and we put new Volvos on that had standing room for 11 or 12 people. Then that's hit capacity. Now we're putting additional vehicles on. So it's a never-ending
And you may,
thing, yeah.
may recall from your long-term plan stuff that in terms of that Shaping Future Dunedin program, they're the first couple of things on that list in terms of improved services is around Mosgiel.
Yeah. Thank you. Does anybody like to move or second that motion?
Love to.
Move it. Marion? Seconded. Kevin. Thank you very much. Do you want to speak to it, either of you? Or Sarah, did you have a comment? No. Okay, all in favour?
Aye.
Awesome, thank you very much. Carried. No one against, was there? No. Councillor Hope asked me if we could have a 5-minute stretch break and cup of tea break. Can we do it in 5 minutes, people? Okay, stand up, stretch, come back, and we've got 4 more items after that. So see you back. Yes, thank you, Richard. I did note that. Okay, are we away again?
Yes, darling.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. We're back to now 7.3, State of Environment Monitoring, the biannual update. And welcoming Gwyneth, and is it? Ika. Thank you. That name didn't come from my backyard. That's an interesting name. Thank you. Lovely name. What are we saying? First attempt at this report. It's an oversight of data collection and a reflection of where we're at as an organisation. So I'm pretty pleased to see this. Again, another first. Doesn't have all the data types within it, and because when it tells me that hydrology dominates at the moment. Can you expand on that for us, please?
Yes, I can. So as Alexa mentioned, we've brought this report to you as part of your role in this group in terms of oversight of the and the implementation of the Environmental Monitoring Network and data and governance. This is our first attempt at this report. We are going to be looking to bring it back to you twice a year. And as we go through, we will start looking to build more and more data coverage of different data sets or parameters into the report. At the moment, the report just focuses on the hydrology network for various reasons, operational reasons. Other parameters such as air, biodiversity, etc., will come in as we reach a point in the operational process. I'll just give you an example. We don't actually have a NEM standard for air just yet. Once that comes on board, we'd probably try and bring that into this report. So there's, for various reasons, for various parameters, we haven't included them at this point in time, but we will look to build them into the report in the future. Other than that, I think we're going to take it as read. Any questions?
Yes.
Councillor Hobbs?
Just taking up from what you said, and was actually privy to a conversation that we as councillors had. I presume you've got a strategic theming about there are so many kinds. We need the hydrology report now for X. We need the air report then for Y. Do you see what I'm trying to say? That's telling you your order of getting this work done, correct? Or are you just choosing it?
Do you mean in terms of what we presented here or in terms of work program?
Both and.
Okay. So what we've presented here in this report is a reflection of, I guess, where we're at operationally in terms of various things. Biodiversity is a new thing to the business. Air, we don't have NEMs, so we will introduce them into this report as we go. In terms of historically for the organisation, yes, there's been a high focus on the hydrology and flood protection is part of that. And as an organisation, we definitely do a lot on air. You'll see we're doing next reports on air as well. But as we become more aware, both through MPS requirements, water quality is growing for us, but also biodiversity is growing for us through MPS requirements that are coming down but also where, as was raised earlier, where the climate change risk assessment might raise other areas where we as an organisation would need to expand and look at our network. So we're always looking at the network and evolving it. And I guess this report will reflect that.
It's not haphazard. It's planned according to other things.
Maybe I should add to this that what you see in this report is basically a tool for our team to assess how our network operates, how it performs. So we use these actually, what you see is an overview of 6 months of data. This actually breaks down to data which are analyzed for their quality and their capture every 2 weeks. So we get actually a 2-week update on how each and every single site or type of data which is represented in here performs. And if that drifts off for some reason, we know we have to act there. Okay. So that's a tool for us. Yeah. And in that sense represents right now kind of the highest profile data, which also adhere to specific nationwide standards. The rest is under development. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anybody else? Any other questions? Councillor Deaker.
I'd like to know, Madam Chair, through you, how this places us alongside other regional councils in terms of the accuracy and reliability of our SOE data collection.
It places us in a very good spot, actually, in a very good level, because over 98% of data capture is very, very good. So that includes the data which have come in and are fully analyzed for their quality and are fully archived. So that really is the whole thing in that sense. Plus the quality ratings, they depend a little bit on what type of data are we looking at or what type of site. So are these QC 500 or 600, for example, what you find in the report? And they reflect that we're performing really well in this context. And it sits, how it exactly sits on par with other councils, I cannot tell you because I haven't read the other reports, but you find similar targets for that. So we're on target with this very much. Yeah.
Confirm what I suspected. Thank you.
Councillor Noon.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Hey, look, this is the second report we've had this afternoon that is in layman's language, and it's really important for us. It's good to have the data, but it's actually understanding the information from an elected member's point of view, understand from a staff point of view the certain triggers that you're looking for to follow up. But from a elected member point of view, this is really good. It just is, as I say, it's in layman's terms and it's valuable for us. So thank you.
Thanks very much.
Councillor Hope.
Echo that of Councillor Noots, and I particularly think it's great how you've just categorised it: rainfall, groundwater, water quality, general trends. That's very, very good. Thank you for that. I appreciate it very much.
Any other questions from anybody? Thank you. Seconder. Councillor Noon, so you got that? Hope and Noon. All in favour?
Aye.
Anyone against? No. Thank you very much, and thank you for that report. It's brilliant, and it's a great place to start.
Thank you.
Okay, so, and we now have the annual air quality report. Who have we got? Gwyneth, you stay there. Sarah Harrison. And so we get this report every year, I think, don't we, Gwyneth?
Yep, that's right. Yep. So Sarah actually presented this one less than a year ago because our last report was delayed due to COVID,
That's right.
and our meetings were agendas were shortened, so we pushed this one out. But traditionally, this one would arrive in March every year.
There's a lot of information, and we're starting to see some trends now, aren't we? Can you just, go ahead and present it? Thank you. Welcome, Sarah.
This annual air quality report is just business as usual report for what happened in the SOE monitoring network last year for 2020. We recorded 80 exceedances across 6 of the airsheds. The most number of exceedances was in Arrowtown, and it was 25. Then it was Milton with 23. This report also included the COVID-19 lockdown data at 4 of our sites. And it includes a summary of the spatial and temporal trends out at Arrowtown as a postscript to the 2019 work that was done there. And also some information on the monitoring projects that could be done to inform the air plan review.
Thank you. Any questions, people? I have one. I didn't understand the non-linear relationship between emissions and concentrations. I wonder if you could just, I can see the graph and things, but it just does my head in. I wonder if you could give me a bit of a lay explanation of that.
Right. Well, the emissions inventories for Arrowtown showed that the emissions had halved between 2006 and 2016. So that's in kgs per day or per year, essentially. However, when we look at our long-term trends, the decrease in concentrations was about 36% over roughly the same period. So there was a halving of the emissions, but less of a decrease of the concentrations, which is what we monitor.
Clear. Thank you for that. Anybody else got anything else to bring or to clarify? Carmen, Councillor Hope.
Right. I see you've added in Lawrence to become airshed 2 and Middlemarch is to be investigated. Can you give us a bit more briefing on that, please?
Lawrence was investigated in 2012, and it was found that it was likely to exceed the NES for PM10 at the time, to the degree that it should have possibly been put into airshed number 2, which is similar to sort of Mosgiel levels. However, and I think that might have been proposed, but I don't actually know the outcome of why that wasn't regazetted, but maybe it's because that involves regazetting. Yeah, and in terms of Middlemarch, I think that's just an airshed that we don't know a lot about yet. And yeah, I think it would be worth looking into in future.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, we're on that. Are there any other areas that should be checked out while we're at it?
I'd like to check out 14 of these airsheds because it's been a long time since a lot of them were monitored. Some of them haven't been monitored at all. And just because we're coming up to including PM 2.5 in our monitoring schedule, I think it'd be a good opportunity to do that.
That's not in our LTP at this stage, is it?
It's been proposed.
Oh, it's been proposed.
Yeah, so proposed.
Is that the 2.5 PMT?
The 2.5 monitoring, we already have got a program work to upgrade the existing monitoring station. I think Sarah's referring to potential new airsheds as part of our air plan review.
And that's what I was asking.
And that work, yeah. So we've got proposals in the LTP to do the work. Yeah.
Thanks. Councillor Laws, did you have something to ask?
No, sorry, I guess it flows on. Are we taking both these reports together, 7.4 and 7.5?
I wasn't, but
because they sort of flow into each other.
They
do. Let's do. Well, can we do that? Are you happy to take a question on that one before introducing it, or do you want to introduce it as well?
Yeah, I'm fine. Yeah.
I'm interested in the measurement of. You've estimated the 2.5. Have you measured? But it also says you've estimated the 10 in the report as well. I'll try and find that. But you wouldn't have measured it, would you? You would have measured it probably, so you wouldn't have estimated it.
Are you talking about the emissions inventory?
Yeah.
That's an estimation of emissions. That's different to concentrations. So emissions is literally what is emitted. Yeah.
So you've estimated that.
So this was conducted by a consultant, and they estimated the amount of emissions based on census data and also a home survey for home heating methods.
So there was no actual measurement.
No, but this is the. Okay.
It's a sort of it's an issue that I've had a bit of an issue around previously. I just wanted to make sure that I got it right. It was an estimation, not a.
It's estimation of emissions, not of concentration.
That's correct. Yeah. So an emissions inventory is pretty much the main way that we find out what the emissions are in any town and anywhere.
So you did the survey. No, the estimation was made by the consultant. Mm-hmm. Then you did the survey and matched the estimate of the consultant against the survey results.
No, sorry, the consultant conducted the survey themselves, and they then got the estimations using those surveys.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Malcolm, which paper are you talking about?
Just on the airsheds, it's on the table on page 678, table 28.
So that's still in the air quality report, which we'll go back to now.
So just trying to understand a wee bit the rationale behind, and if you're looking if I look particularly at North Otago, where Oamaru hasn't been sampled since 2009, Palmerston was 2014, for the likes of Hampton. So how are we deciding that those places are still okay, or if anything's changed, and what indicators have we?
That's part of one of the reasons why I'd like to conduct this extra project that's been proposed. But one of the assumptions we can make is if we take the data from, say, 2009 in Oamaru, we can assume back then that there was probably more burners that were higher emitters than today's burners, because over time people do replace them with newer ones. Yeah, but essentially we don't, apart from that.
Are there any further questions around this first report?
I'd just like to make the comment though, that if we're going to be phasing out gas, as is in the Dear Lord, because
on a chainsaw,
that's going to, and if we all end up having to take heat pumps into Cromwell or Wellington or Allentown, the social cost is going to be horrendous. But
it's not an easy problem.
It is not.
No. Perhaps built environment is somewhere to talk about that. Can I put, please, that we've received the first report, 7.4, the annual air quality report.
Happy to do that.
Thank you, Kevin. Anyone? And Carmen will second it. And any discussion on those? Right. All in favour?
Aye.
All against? None. That's great. Thank you. And so let's just do the same. Is there anything you would like to add to 7.5? We'll go back to that. The emissions inventory and low emissions technology review.
Just take it as read.
Okay. Anybody? Any questions?
Oh, sorry. No, I'm just going to second that.
Oh, you can put the motion if you like.
Take it as read.
I'll second it.
Okay, and so that is Councillor Laws and Councillor Hobbs. Is that one? Same sentence?
Councillor Calvert.
Councillor Calvert.
Okay.
Oh, I'm not saying anything. There's always a fly in the ointment.
Did you have a question or discussion point? Comment?
No, wouldn't dream of it.
Okay, all in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. Right, you got that everything you need. Okay. Okay, so we're up to 7.6, charging along here. The urban monitoring and quarterly update. That's Kyle probably. And I believe this is the first time we've received this report under the 2020 policy statement. That's correct.
That is correct. I will do a quick introduction, I think.
And there's some pretty chunky...
Some fascinating.
Yes, chunky pieces of information in this report. That's very, very interesting. Thank you. Over to you, Kyle.
Thank you, councillors. As was said by the chair, this is the first report under the MPSUD and its preceding MPSUDC as well. This report being the first one, I thought I'd concentrate on the compulsory indicators that we're required to monitor that are provided by MFE and MHUD, along with some commentary about what they might show, what they are, and what they might help indicate as well. My intention is going forward that these will form the basis of the quarterly reports. They'll be updated with the preceding quarter's information, and that would be supplemented with other data sources as they come to light. For example, census data is now available at quite a fine grain, so that could provide some interesting background data, and the HBAs will also be being developed over time as well. We're also going to be refining the approach in collaboration with the region's TAs as they start to evolve their approach and understanding to these issues as well. The report itself contains data that is, by definition, looking backwards. It's telling us what has happened, not necessarily what's going to happen going forwards. But in summary, the data shows that population and growth really took off from preceding period in the 90s of small declines, took off from 2002 and really ramped up from 2014. Housing supply also responded from about those times as well. But since about 2018, it appears that housing supply hasn't met demand. And we've had increasing prices and rents since then as well. There is some impact from COVID coming through in the data, but it does, most of it does end in Q4 2020 or before. So we're not necessarily seeing the more recent pickup in prices and rents back to pretty much what they were before as well. The implications for this, just sitting through some of the other reports, is obvious that urban growth and development has a strong intersection with many of the things that you've heard today. But in terms of what the NPSUD requires you as decision makers to do is to be better informed about how this organisation makes decisions to facilitate and support infrastructure and development capacity improvements going forward. So thinking about things like Variation 2 and the Queenstown Lake Spatial Plan are examples of where our decisions around that should be informed by what these indicators and metrics are telling us. One of the things I haven't covered too much in this one is future predictions of growth. They obviously are fairly or even more uncertain than they would be normally because of COVID. Queenstown Lakes, for example, suggested that their spatial plan scenario is effectively anticipating a fairly strong rebound, largely reflecting that the fundamental drivers of growth in Queenstown being its high quality environment and a range of other issues still exist. And that is still being reflected in pretty strong net internal migration into that area anecdotally as well. Yeah, I think that's the end of that, and happy to take any questions or comments.
Councillor Laws? I mean, apart from satisfying a desire for train spotting, I'm struggling with, and it's not your fault, so, you know, you've got to do this. I'm struggling to see how this information is of any practical value or moment. The private sector creates housing in this country, overwhelmingly in our region, and certainly the ability of TAs to influence or create housing is minuscule to negligible. Is this just something we have to do because we're required to do it?
To answer your question boldly, yes, it is something that we are required to do, but the NPSUD would say that the ability for TAs to influence the opportunities for the private market to deliver housing is stronger than your question would suggest. So providing opportunities to meet growth is essentially what the NPSUD is about, to change planning, to look ahead, to think about what's needed and make space and provision for that to happen. And part of this monitoring is to improve the responsiveness of those decisions to changes that have happened in the more recent past as well.
Can I just add to that? I think Kyle mentioned, and it's in point 4 of the report, that this being the first one we've focused on what we have to report, but there's still an opportunity as the TAs start doing their reports as well, to work with them to make sure that as a combination of reports we're getting the best value we can out of them.
Well, that was the other point I was going to make. TAs are already doing this. Well, I'm certainly aware that Central Otago has and is. I imagine a quick Queenstown ditto. What do we do with this information? Do we just give it to them and say, off you go, this should help you? I mean...
Yeah, so this is supposed to inform this council within the remit of the things that it does and does not do, to think about what the consequences of those decisions may be for TAs, for example, to deliver more housing or not. For some things, it may be relatively tenuous, as you point out. For others, maybe less so. But without being informed.
Any other questions? Michael Decker?
Kyle, thank you. I'm looking at page 797 of our agenda, and it's just one of your later graphs, and it's headed price-cost ratio.
Ah, yes.
And I don't understand what that means. I'm sure other people around the table do, but I'm not sure what you mean by price-cost ratio.
Yes, this one is probably one where I'm more in line with Councillor Law's views on that. This one is essentially trying to produce a indication of how much land contributes to the average price of new houses.
So the scarcity or the availability.
That's the implication, essentially. So if a house costs 1 to build, that's the build cost is 1, whether that's 500,000, 300,000 or whatever.
Sure.
That's converted to 1, and the sale price is 1.5, being the land adds another 30% to the sale price, and that's what people pay. That's a good ratio. So the land cost component of standalone houses, which these only cover, is 30%, has been identified as what the ideal ratio should be. Interestingly, it appears that the ratio everywhere apart from Queenstown has been consistently below that, though it has been creeping up recently. So because this covers second-hand houses as well, there could be an elevated effect where those properties are standalone houses, but they're being bought as development opportunities. So the developer would necessarily be paying more for the property, the underlying land, than the house itself is arguably worth. But this is essentially trying to articulate the degree to which land price appreciation impacts on the sale prices of standalone houses. So the implication of that would be that where that ratio starts to go up, that either indicates that you should allow more intensification or provide for more greenfields development for standalone houses.
What would your... Oh, sorry, who's...
No, it's just, I mean, it's the cost of building a house, you know, because that's the problem.
Yeah.
And you could almost put that report over there and go, lovely. But in actual fact, we have some of the highest building cost prices per square metre in the world. And that's what's the real problem. And then you add the cost of land on top of that.
Try and get a section in Wellington.
But try and build on it after you've got your section.
Oh, that's bugger all compared to the real problem. Sorry,
Well,
I'm getting experience right now.
But
I just need to back up council on that issue because it is being involved in the building. It is the building cost, and we will see that graph, which is the black graph at the top, because of the scarcity of land, and that will increase. It's just a supply and demand situation, really. But in all our other areas, apart from Queenstown, that the land is actually reasonably priced and reasonably available.
That's true.
The real problem for especially new people into the market is actually the cost of the build.
Correct.
So what's happened, Kyle, when we look at that graph? Great, I'm glad you raised that question, Michael. The price cost ratio in Queenstown, it had a peak by looking at 2018, then it's dropping down again. What does that represent?
Yeah, so that would suggest that either people are spending more on the house, so build costs may be increasing, as rightly pointed out,
right.
Or there was something happened in the market there, that there was more intensification, for example. So terrace houses, for example, cost more per square metre to build, but use less land. Or there was more greenfield supplied, which I don't think is the case in this particular area at that time.
Yeah. Thank you. Any other questions on this one? I'll put the motion to receive the report. Does anybody want to second that? Councillor Hope. Any discussion? Thanks for that report. It's fascinating. All in favour?
Aye.
Thank you. It's carried. And I believe that brings us to the end of the meeting, does it? Haven't missed anything. We'll do that after. We'll just close the meeting. What's that?
Oh,
okay.